Judge Maya Lawson stood in front of the court, her eyes fixed intently on the row of lawyers and the spectators. The atmosphere in the Brookhaven District Courtroom was heavy, filled with hushed murmurs, the rustling of papers, and the distant sound of gavel strikes from the neighboring courtrooms. She had sat at the judge's bench for many years, overseeing thousands of cases, but today felt different. She adjusted her black robe, feeling the weight of the responsibility in her hands. Maya had been a longtime judge, always striving to maintain fairness and patience with every case. But today, her heart was racing, and her mind couldn't settle. The court was about to hear an important case. The state of Brooklyn's Derek Blackwell. Maya knew that the name of the defendant, Derek Blackwell, was one she never expected to hear in her life, at least not in her role as a judge. When Derek was led into the courtroom in prison clothes, shackled at the wrists and ankles, Maya felt like a direct shock to her heart. The man standing before her was Derek, a childhood friend. Maya and Derek had once been very close, growing up in a slum where racial discrimination and poverty were inseparable parts of life. Memories of their childhood flooded her mind. The afternoons spent playing together, sitting under the oak tree, talking about their futures and dreams of leaving that place. But now, standing before her was a man, not the boy she once ran the streets with. Maya struggled to keep her composure, but everything had changed so quickly, and she realized that today's trial wouldn't just be a simple case. It would challenge the very beliefs of fairness and justice she had fought to uphold for all these years. Maya Lawson sat up straight in her judge's chair, trying to regain her composure as she looked at Derek Blackwell, her childhood friend, standing before her in prison clothes. A wave of confusion and pain overtook her heart, but as a judge, Maya couldn't let her personal feelings interfere with justice. She took a deep breath and began the proceedings. Defendant Derek Blackwell, Maya began, her voice strong but betraying the tension she felt. You are accused of robbery and assaulting a store clerk at a grocery store on the evening of the 15th of last month. You have the right to defend yourself, and your attorney may present your case. Derek stood there, silent, only gazing at Maya without saying a word. The entire room was still, as if everyone knew what Maya couldn't say out loud. She and Derek had once been close friends, having shared the struggles of growing up in a poor neighborhood and dreamed together of escaping the violence and injustice that surrounded them. But now that same friend was a criminal standing in a courtroom she had to preside over. As Derek's attorney, a woman named Lena Hayes, stood up to defend him, Maya couldn't help but notice how Lena presented her defense. Lena argued that Derek was not the perpetrator, that the blurry CCTV video was not enough to prove his guilt. This confused Maya because she knew Derek, her old friend, was not a violent person, yet the case was filled with evidence that made it hard for him to justify himself. Maya turned her attention back to the case files, wondering how she could maintain objectivity. Her mind circled around the questions of truth and justice. Did Derek really commit the crime? And if he didn't, was he simply a victim of an unjust system, like the one they both had grown up in? Maya silently prayed she would find the answer. But she also knew that justice couldn't just rely on personal emotions, no matter how much the memories of Derek and their past filled her mind. Maya closed her eyes, her hands still gripping the desk, as a lump in her throat began to rise with the sudden flood of memories about Derek. She remembered the warm summer days when they were both children, living in a poor neighborhood where dreams seemed like an unattainable luxury. The afternoons they spent playing basketball in Derek's backyard, sometimes competing to see who could make the best shot, all while the laughter and the scolding from the adults echoed around them. Maya vividly remembered one time when they were in high school. Derek sat next to her under a large palm tree near the creek, holding the book she had lent him. "Do you think we can ever escape this place, Maya?" Derek had asked, his voice quiet, eyes looking far off into the distance. She remembered laughing softly and replying, "Of course, if we try." But Derek shook his head. "I'm not so sure, Maya. We were born into an unfair world. No matter how hard we try, we'll eventually be sucked into it." That was the first time she felt the despair in Derek's words. Neither of them knew that those words would become a prophecy for the different paths they would each walk in life. Maya looked back at the years gone by, seeing the invisible divide between her and Derek, as she committed to going to college and becoming a judge, while Derek couldn't escape the traps of life. She hadn't been able to save him, even though she always thought there would be a way for both of them to escape. Now, standing before Derek in this courtroom, Maya wondered if she had overlooked all the warning signs, the signals he had sent in their childhood stories. Could justice really bring the truth? Or was it all just a series of irreversible mistakes? Maya sat in her office, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk, the light from the computer screen reflecting off her tired face. She couldn't shake the thoughts of Derek. Right now, all the elements of the case were clear before her, yet it felt like a game of fate. Every decision Maya made in the courtroom could change everything, not just for Derek, but for herself as well. The feeling of helplessness, the confusion, overwhelmed her like a powerful wave, pushing her into a situation with no way out. Maya knew that if she didn't make a fair ruling, there would be serious consequences, not just for Derek, but for the entire community she represented. She had been a judge for over 7 years, but this case was unlike any she had ever handled. The name Derek Gray, her childhood friend, now stood before her as a criminal, and Maya had to maintain her stance. She couldn't let the past creep into her decision, even though it lingered over her like a ghost. Derek Gray, someone who was once my best friend, and now the defendant, Maya whispered, her eyes staring intently at the case file. She wondered if she could overcome her personal feelings to make the right ruling, or if her attachment to the past would overshadow her reason. Maya knew that protecting justice was the most important thing in her career, but a part of her heart couldn't stop asking, is there any forgiveness for people like Derek? Or will he always be surrounded by the darkness of life? The hesitation and deep sorrow in her heart made it impossible to make a decision immediately. Things became more complicated when she realized that her decision would not only affect one person, but an entire community that yearned for justice. Maya took a deep breath and decided that, no matter what, she would do what was right. Maya stood in front of her office window, the golden light of the sunset streaming through the curtains, casting soft yellow streaks on the tiled floor. She looked out into the vast space beyond, but her mind wandered back to the years of her youth with Derek. A strange feeling stirred inside her whenever she thought of him. They had once been best friends, sharing secrets, dreams, and hopes. But now everything was different. Over the years, Maya had tightly closed the emotional door to Derek. She had tried to convince herself that what had happened in the past was just memories, and that revisiting those emotions would only bring pain. But a part of her, deep in her heart, couldn't stop thinking about him. The times they talked about the future, the times they played around the streets of Hammond, were long gone. Instead, there were only cold glances from both sides, invisible barriers Maya couldn't cross. Derek, though now a bitter man with a lost past, still held a part of his childhood image of her in his eyes. Maya felt that every time their eyes met in the courtroom. It was as if he was yearning for redemption from the one person he had once trusted most. Her emotions surged, but she had learned to hold them back. Maya sighed, stepping out of her office and looking at the case file. This repressed emotional connection had become a major challenge. She needed to distinguish between personal feelings and professional responsibility. But the question that kept circling in her mind was, can a judge set aside the past to make a fair ruling? Or will the past and emotions forever dictate her, like scars that can never be erased from the heart? The trial continued, the atmosphere heavy with tension that enveloped the entire courtroom. Maya sat at the bench, her hands resting on the desk, her eyes narrowing as she listened to the arguments from both sides. She felt weary, not just from the work, but from the emotions overwhelming her. Derek, the man who had once been her best friend, now stood before her as the defendant, and all she had to do was ensure that justice was served. But how could she maintain her objectivity when the memories of the past were constantly surrounding her? The prosecution presented strong evidence, describing Derek's criminal actions. They emphasized that the robbery had been captured on surveillance footage, and the physical evidence at the scene matched his presence. Maya listened, but an unsettling feeling lingered. She knew the legal system could do its part, but there were gaps that only those involved in the case could truly understand. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. Lisa Porter stood up confidently. She began to counter each of the prosecution's points, highlighting the ambiguities in the surveillance footage and the gaps in the physical evidence. We cannot base a life's fate on assumptions and unclear evidence, Lisa said, her sharp gaze directed at Derek. Perhaps only those who have known Derek can understand that he's not that kind of person. Maya felt a tightness in her chest. Lisa's words weren't just logical arguments. They made her realize a painful truth. She had once understood Derek, perhaps even enough to explain the hidden motives behind his actions. But Maya couldn't let personal emotions cloud justice. She sighed and looked toward the jury. This was no longer just a confrontation in the courtroom. It was an internal struggle for Maya, between justice and emotion. She wasn't sure if she could bear the weight of this decision. The trial had reached its most pivotal moment, the point at which Maya could not retreat. After days of arguments, debates, and emotional turmoil within her heart, she now had to make the final decision. Every eye in the courtroom was on her. Every word spoken by the attorneys was like a dagger thrusting into her mind, each cut making Maya feel as though she could endure no more. Though she had tried to separate her personal feelings, the memories of Derek still weighed heavily on her, like a massive stone pressing down. She had once loved him, once believed they would have a future together, but now here he stood before her, facing serious charges. Maya sat still, her heart in turmoil, her eyes fixed on Derek. He stood there, his gaze filled with regret, but also determination, almost as if begging her to see something that all the evidence couldn't reveal. His lips moved slightly, not offering a defense, but simply whispering, "You know I'm not like that." In that moment, Maya could no longer hold back her emotions. Each passing second felt like the world was holding its breath. She remembered the childhood days, the afternoons spent playing with Derek, the nights they talked beneath the dim light. Everything came rushing back into her mind, clearer than ever before. But in this moment, Maya had to do something she had never imagined. She had to separate the past from justice. With a deep sigh, Maya took a long breath and picked up the gavel. She turned toward the jury, her gaze resolute. This court has heard all the evidence, and today we are not just judging a criminal, but a system that we must trust. She said then with a firm voice, she continued, "The court declares, in this case, the defendant does not have enough evidence to be convicted. The trial is concluded." The courtroom fell silent, the only sound the echo of the gavel, as the moment of decision had come. Maya felt a tremendous pressure lift, but at the same time, she knew that in making this decision, she had just lost a part of herself. Maya walked out of the courtroom, her hand tightly gripping the case file she had kept throughout the trial. The bright afternoon light was fading, but her mind was still overwhelmed by a wave of chaotic emotions that she couldn't shake. She knew that her decision had changed everything, but in that moment, the feeling wasn't just one of relief, it was also one of deep regret. Yes, she had declared that there was insufficient evidence to convict Derek, but a part of Maya felt that the full truth had not yet been revealed. As soon as the court adjourned, Maya made a decision. She would not stop there. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong, that there was a secret she hadn't yet uncovered. Her decision was not the end, but a new beginning, a separate investigation. As the head of the court, Maya was determined to find the truth, not just for justice, but for herself and for peace of mind. A surprising encounter with a new witness changed everything. This person, an employee from the store where the robbery occurred, had decided to come forward after being convinced by Maya. The witness confirmed that the man in the surveillance video was not Derek. The video was blurry and showed signs of having been tampered with. This revelation completely changed the course of the case. Maya looked at everything with fresh eyes. Now she held the truth in her hands, but the final decision would be hers. The weight in her heart resurfaced. Could she face this truth and do the right thing? She stood at a crossroads, but there was no longer any doubt. Justice was the only thing she must pursue. Maya sat in her office, the faint glow of the desk lamp highlighting the files, documents, and photos spread across the table. Although everything around her was in order, the sense of relief she had imagined would come after resolving the case was now absent. Instead, she felt an emptiness and an ongoing internal struggle. Yes, she had followed the procedure, delivered a fair verdict. Derek was acquitted. But had true justice really been achieved? The legal system that Maya had always trusted now seemed to have made her question herself and her role in a world full of ambiguity. She reflected on everything that had happened during the trial. The justice system, which Maya once saw as a great tool to protect the innocent and punish the guilty, now appeared weak and riddled with imperfections. Evidence had been overlooked, mistakes ignored, and there was even a lack of fairness in how individuals were judged, categorized based on appearance and their social context. Maya stared at the photo of Derek in the file and wondered if the truth she hadn't seen might have been hidden by a system she had devoted her life to. Ultimately, Maya realized that justice is not just about applying the law. It's about recognizing people as individuals with their own circumstances, emotions, and vulnerabilities. She came to understand that the justice system is imperfect, and her duty wasn't only to follow the rules, it was also to protect the truth, to fight for those who had been abandoned by that very system. The lesson Maya learned, painful as it was that justice cannot be applied with a mechanical eye. It requires trust, empathy, and a deeper understanding of humanity. The trial ended, but Maya still couldn't shake the uneasy feeling inside her. Even though Derek was acquitted, the questions that lingered within her had never been clearer. She left the courtroom, stepping outside with her mind full of chaotic thoughts. The darkness of New York City thickened as night fell, and the light from the street lamps only highlighted the loneliness within Maya. She watched the people passing by, those who seemed unaware that a dramatic trial had just concluded. The justice system that Maya had once admired was no longer sacred to her. Instead, it had become a complex entity riddled with countless flaws. Maya wondered if she could change anything, or if she would remain just a cog in the larger machine, numb to the system's shortcomings. At that moment, an unexpected call from Derek rang through her phone. His voice was warm but filled with a concern. "Maya, I know this isn't over. Thank you for standing by me." Maya hesitated, unsure of what to say. She couldn't answer immediately because, even in those words of gratitude, she felt a distance between them. A distance not just from their different paths in life, but from everything she had witnessed and learned throughout this process. Maya's life would never be the same again. The end of the trial, though a legal victory, left her with more unanswered questions. To find a way forward, she needed to confront harder truths. Not everything in life can be solved by law, and sometimes justice isn't easy to recognize. Maya knew that the road ahead would be long, and the questions about the justice system, ethics, and humanity would continue to haunt her until she found the real answers. The important lesson from this story is the awareness of the justice system and the complexities we cannot see in a trial or a simple case. Maya learned that justice is not just about handing down a verdict based on evidence and procedure, but sometimes it's a long process of truly understanding people, societal prejudices, and the deep consequences they leave behind. In life, we often easily place trust in what's been laid out for us or believe in the fairness of the system. However, reality sometimes doesn't align with what we think. That's why every individual needs to have a deeper perspective, learn to ask questions, understand the surrounding factors, and always seek fairness not just from the system, but from themselves as well.